Welcome to the Lost in History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. The image captures a creative and symbolic moment of performance art, reflecting the use of unusual costumes to express characteristics of the character or the music presented. In 1962, a village boy was photographed with apples in his hands in the district of Kostanay, in the then Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic. The image portrays a simple moment of rural daily life with elements typical of life in the Soviet countryside. In 1932, Max Factor was photographed taking precise measurements of a young woman's head and face using his beauty calibrator. Max Factor was a pioneer in the beauty and film industry, and his methods influenced makeup practices both in Hollywood and in the broader cosmetics market. In September 1862, Abraham Lincoln visited the Antietam battlefield a few days after one of the most striking engagements of the 19th century in the United States. The visit took place in Maryland, where the president met with commanders and soldiers to assess the situation. In 1936, a migrant farm worker was photographed next to his wife and their 10 children. They were part of thousands of families who moved across the United States in search of work on farms. This period was marked by economic hardship and severe droughts that affected agricultural production. During this visit, circus performers sought to bring joy to children. One of the characters was named Charlie Smith, who was part of the show. These visits were important to provide moments of fun and distraction for children undergoing treatment. Anne Frank in front of the Opekta Company building on the Singel Canal in Amsterdam in 1935. The company belonged to her father, Otto Frank. Anne was only 6 years old at that time. The Frank family had moved from Germany to the Netherlands in search of a new beginning. Soldiers of the Royal Hungarian Army were photographed in a field kitchen in the year 1938. These mobile kitchens were used to prepare hot meals for the troops in training areas or while on the move. Around the 1940s, people enjoyed the day at the beach while listening to the radio. Portable sets made it possible to take music, news, and entertainment programs to outdoor settings. The radio was one of the main forms of communication and leisure of the time. On February 26, 1938, Hermann Goering and Polish President Ignacy Mościcki took part in a hunting trip. The meeting occurred during a time of diplomatic relations between Germany and Poland, before the political changes that would take place the following year. In May 1945, a Soviet soldier announced the formal surrender of Germany on the streets of Berlin. The declaration marked the official end of hostilities in the region and represented a widely awaited historic moment. People gathered in streets and squares to hear the news. In 1938 in London, students took part in safety drills using protective masks and proceeding to underground shelters. These activities were part of training organized by local authorities as a preventive measure. On August 26, 1973, a bank robbery took place in Norrmalmstorg, Stockholm, Sweden, involving the Swede Clark Olofsson, who was inside the branch vault with other people. On April 30, 1945, photographer Lee Miller was recorded taking a bath in Adolf Hitler's apartment in Munich. The image was made by her colleague and photographer, David E. Sherman, shortly after the Allied forces entered the city at the end of the Second World War. On April 17, 1942, people lined up in front of a butcher shop in the North Cheam area in Surrey, England, to buy horse meat. The scene reflects the difficulties faced by the population during wartime and the adaptation of eating habits in the face of scarcity. In 1968, Lo Man Hung was a young photographer working during the conflict in Vietnam. At only 13 years of age, he captured images of daily life in affected areas, using simple equipment and the support of professional journalists. Even at such a young age, his work was recognized by local news outlets. In 1989, a traffic jam was recorded near the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin when citizens of East Germany began crossing to the western side of the city. In 1941, during the Second World War, Australian lumberjacks were photographed using axes as improvised mirrors while shaving. The scene shows strong men in a moment of personal care, even amid heavy tasks and rustic settings. In 1970, during a severe snowstorm in Czechoslovakia, railway workers used a MiG-15 jet engine, a military aircraft engine, to defrost the tracks. In 1953, a painter worked on the structure of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Maintaining the monument required regular painting to protect the metal from exposure to the weather. The work was done at great heights, using safety belts and basic equipment. In 1950, workers took a smoking break during the construction of the Auckland Harbour Bridge in New Zealand. The project was one of the country's largest at that time, linking the northern and central parts of the city. These rest moments were part of the intense routine at construction sites. The women known as giraffe women in Myanmar, formerly called Burma. They are famous for wearing neck rings that lengthen that part of the body. This tradition is part of the culture of some local communities and is passed down from generation to generation. In 1937, photographer Jimmy Syme captured the image known as Toffs and Tufts, a symbolic portrait of class division in Britain before the Second World War. The photo shows two well-dressed boys, students at a private school, next to three boys in simple clothing from the working class. In April 1912, a crowd gathered in New York, waiting for news about the people rescued from the ship Titanic. The city was the final destination of the voyage, and many families and onlookers sought information at the harbor and nearby areas. The Titanic had begun its crossing in the United Kingdom with hundreds of passengers on board. In 1954, Maria Felix was already one of the most iconic actresses of the golden age of Mexican cinema. Known for her powerful screen presence, elegance, and memorable roles, she stood out in films that made her a symbol of independence and sophistication. In 1945, Nancy Wake was one of the leading espionage agents serving the Allies during the Second World War. She became known as the White Mouse, a nickname given by the enemy's secret police because of her skill at escaping capture. In 1969, Neil Armstrong's family watched the launch of the Apollo 11 mission to the moon. The moment took place at Kennedy Space Center in Florida and marked the beginning of one of the most important journeys in space exploration. In June 1953, in London, England, the official portrait of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II was made. The ceremony took place at Westminster Abbey on June 2nd, marking the formal beginning of her reign. On January 21st, 1986, the entire British Concorde fleet was brought together in a single image at Heathrow Airport in London. The gathering featured 7 aircraft lined up on the runway, in a historic moment for aviation. The Concorde was a supersonic airplane developed in partnership by the United Kingdom and France. On June 27, 1923, the first successful aerial refueling operation was carried out in San Diego, California. Pilots Lowell H. Smith and John P. Richter performed the maneuver using 2 biplanes of the time. In 1903, Charles Joseph Bonaparte, a nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, founded the Bureau of Investigation in the United States. The institution was created during the administration of President Theodore Roosevelt, with the purpose of investigating federal matters. Charles Bonaparte was a lawyer and held the position of Attorney General. In August 1969, the Woodstock Festival was held in Bethel in the state of New York. The organizers expected about 50,000 people, but the attendance exceeded 400,000, turning the event into one of the largest cultural gatherings in history. Woodstock, held in August 1969, was one of the largest cultural gatherings in history. The festival took place in Bethel in the state of New York and brought together more than 400,000 people, far exceeding the initial expectation of 50,000 participants. The Star Wars cast out of costume includes Harrison Ford, David Prowse, Peter Mayhew, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill. They portrayed, respectively, Han Solo, Darth Vader, Chewbacca, Princess Leia, and Luke Skywalker. In 1984, George Lucas worked on film projects before the widespread use of computer-generated effects. In that phase, scenes for films such as those in the Jedi saga were filmed in places like the Arizona desert, using natural settings. In 1976, during the filming of Star Wars in Tunisia, Kenny Baker was recorded having lunch behind the scenes. He was the actor responsible for portraying the character R2-D2 inside a compact metal structure. In the 1960s, Bruce Lee began teaching martial arts to his son, Brandon Lee, from a very young age. At home or outdoors, training moments were part of the family's daily life. Bruce Lee was known for developing his own fighting style and valued discipline, balance, and control. In the 1940s, during the Second World War, it was common to see personalized paintings on the front fuselage of military airplanes, known as nose art. A striking example is that of the B-24 Liberator bomber. In 1944, on the island of Saipan, United States Marine Randall Sprenger was photographed finishing the details and painting the name Little Gem on a B-29 Superfortress aircraft. This type of aircraft was used on long missions and received personalized names and visual art applied by crew members. On December 11, 1963, the flags of the newly independent Kenya and the Sultanate of Zanzibar were raised for the first time at the headquarters of the United Nations. The ceremony marked the official entry of the 2 new member states into the international organization. In 1979, Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy made an unexpected visit to the set of the film Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. the film's production was underway at the Lucasfilm Studios. The characters came from the program The Muppet Show, which was very popular at the time. In the 1920s, a Japanese couple was recorded taking a photograph of themselves in front of a mirror in one of the earliest examples of what is now known as a self-portrait or selfie. The image was made with a traditional camera of the time, positioned to capture the reflection in the mirror. In 1940, a migrant family in the state of Arizona represented the reality of many people who moved in search of work and better living conditions. These families usually traveled through agricultural regions, following the harvests and living simply. Around 1917, during the period of the Russian Revolution, Joseph Stalin was a young activist involved in the Bolshevik movement. He took part in the political organization that sought to change the country's system, alongside other names that would gain prominence in the following years. In 1930, Joseph Stalin was photographed walking to work in Moscow during the period when he led the Soviet Union. Wearing a characteristic overcoat and hat, he walked through the streets of the capital amid the routine of government. In July 1987, Yuri Dubinin, then the ambassador of the Soviet Union to the United States, invited Donald Trump, who was 41 years old at the time, to visit Moscow. Trump was already a well-known figure in real estate and expressed interest in expanding his business internationally. In the 1930s, in the Soviet Union, it was common to use public panels called boards of shame to expose people whose behavior was considered contrary to the ideological norms of the state. In 1953, Senator Jack Kennedy and his fiancée Jackie were photographed during their engagement. At the time, John Fitzgerald Kennedy held a seat in the Senate of the United States and was gaining prominence in national politics. In 1900, the graduating class of the Howard University School of Law in Washington completed their studies at a time of great historical significance. The institution, founded after the Civil War of the United States, was created to offer higher education to African American students. Around 1863, a view of Washington in the United States showed the city in a process of growth. In the foreground stood Trinity Episcopal Church, an important building of the era. In the background appeared the Capitol building, still under construction. In 1958, an engineer was photographed connecting wires in one of the earliest computers of international business machines. These systems occupied entire rooms and used thousands of manual components, such as valves, cables, and panels. In 1931, the landscape of Venice Beach in Los Angeles included several oil extraction towers known as derricks. These structures were part of an intense oil activity that marked the region in the early 20th century. On the morning of December 17, 1773, residents of the Dorchester Neck area in Boston found remnants of tea chests scattered along the shore. These fragments were direct traces of the event known as the Boston Tea Party, which had occurred the night before. In 1960, the city of Brasilia was under construction in the interior of Brazil. The project was created to be the new capital of the country, with the goal of promoting development in areas farther from the coast. In 1967, An Italian family prepared for summer vacation by traveling in a Fiat 500. The small car, popular in Italy and other European countries, was a symbol of accessible mobility and family spirit. In 1959, the beach of Positano on the Amalfi Coast in Italy was a popular destination among local and foreign visitors. With its colorful houses on the hillsides and the calm sea in the background, the town offered a unique and welcoming setting. In 1935, a visitor was photographed holding a candle and smiling in front of the large collection of skulls in the Paris catacombs. The image highlights the contrast between the dark atmosphere of the place and the curiosity of the people who visit it, drawn by its history and uniqueness. In 1982, the concept of the Office of the Future presented technological innovations and ideas that sought to modernize the workplace. Among the elements included were personal computers, video monitors, telephones with multiple functions, and fax machines. On August 9, 1918, during the Battle of Amiens, a homing pigeon was released through a side hatch of a British tank near the town of Albert in France. These birds were used to send messages on the battlefield, where other means of communication could fail. In 1945, after the surrender of German forces in Norway, a depot at Sola Airfield in Stavanger was used to store part of the roughly 30,000 rifles that had been collected. On June 2, 1944, Soviet and American airmen were photographed together at a Russian airbase. They posed next to bombs on which they had written messages intended for enemy forces, as part of a symbolic gesture of military cooperation. In 1915, during the First World War, French soldiers were recorded marching behind a dog dressed in military attire. The scene took place in an area near the front lines and reflects light moments amid the difficult conditions of the conflict. Portuguese women from the Azores Islands were traditionally seen wearing hooded capes known as capotes e capelas. These garments were part of the local culture and were used mainly on the islands of São Miguel and Terceira. In 1952, a kebab vendor was photographed surrounded by cats on the streets of Istanbul, Turkey. The scene reflects the traditional bond between the city's residents and cats, who are widely respected and cared for in daily life. In 1885, Spanish Egyptologist Eduardo Toda y Güell was photographed next to ancient Egyptian mummies at the Bulaq Museum in Cairo. He became known for discovering and opening the intact tomb of Sennacherib, an important craftsman of ancient Egypt. In 1866, a Japanese mother and her son were photographed in a formal portrait, representing family life in 19th century Japan. Both wore traditional clothing, such as the kimono, typical of the transition period between the Edo and Meiji eras. This description speaks about women who began working in factories during the Second World War in the year 1943. Many women helped in industrial production, taking on important roles in factories. The Piegan are part of the indigenous peoples of North America. At that time, they lived in communities with their own traditions and cultures. Men such as Iron Breast had important roles in their societies, helping to preserve the customs and the history of their people. Charlie Chaplin a famous actor and comedian, in the year 1931. He appears taking money from his pocket to buy flowers at a flower shop. Chaplin was known for his silent films and his iconic character, the Tramp. In 1950, Grace Kelly was in the studios, beginning her career as an actress. At the time, she took part in screen tests, photo sessions, and recordings for film and television productions. In 1957, Vicki Dugan drew attention in Los Angeles for her style and striking presence in film and fashion. She was known for wearing dresses with very deep open backs, which became her trademark. Vicki was a model and actress, appearing in films and events in Hollywood during the 1950s. Hollywood Boulevard, around 1965, was one of the busiest centers of Los Angeles, California. The avenue was already famous for its Walk of Fame stars, iconic theaters such as Grauman's Chinese Theater, and bright signs that highlighted the glamour of the entertainment industry. In 1913, the German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II was photographed smoking a cigarette. This image was captured shortly before the start of the First World War, during the final years of his reign in the German Empire. In May 1945, the uniforms of the Danish police were simple and functional, reflecting the final period of the Second World War. In that month, Denmark was liberated after years of occupation. A roller skater was photographed among pedestrians in Midtown Manhattan in New York City in the year 1979. The scene reflects the urban and relaxed lifestyle of the time, when roller skates became a popular form of leisure and transportation in big cities. In 1946 in New York City, advertisements were direct and to the point, focusing on quickly informing the public about the product or service offered. In 1957 in the Netherlands, open-air schools operated. These schools held classes outdoors, with desks and materials organized outside traditional classrooms. The goal was to provide natural light and air circulation to improve children's health and learning. In 1972, during the Apollo 17 mission, a small piece of rough Velcro-type material was included inside the helmet of the spacesuits at the astronauts' request. The purpose was to allow them to scratch their noses during activities on the lunar surface. In the 1920s, encounters with circus performers were seen as unique and charming moments. Circuses traveled through many cities, bringing shows with acrobats, tightrope walkers, and captivating characters. In 1940, in England, soldiers who were rehearsing a performance in theatrical costumes were surprised by an air raid warning. The activity was interrupted, and they ran to their defensive positions, operating anti-aircraft guns. In 1944, the United States Pacific Fleet positioned itself for strategic operations during the Marshall Islands campaign. This phase was part of a series of organized naval movements in the Pacific Ocean. In 1963, New York City subway passengers read their newspapers during the morning commute. It was a common habit in large cities, where people used travel time to keep up with local and international news. In the 1940s, during the Second World War, soldiers were photographed posing with a dog while on duty. Animals such as dogs were often kept at bases for their companionship and also for their skills in patrol, search, or alert missions. In 1944, Pablo Picasso worked in his studio in Paris during a period of intense artistic production. The space was filled with canvases, brushes, sculptures, and objects that reflected his creativity and striking style. In 1977, employees of McDonald's were frequently photographed wearing standardized uniforms with bright colors, paper hats, and aprons, reflecting the brand's visual style at the time. In 1976, in the village of Nizhnaya Suzga, in the Altai region, a girl was photographed holding a cat in a simple and calm moment of rural daily life. The scene shows the emotional bond between the child and the animal, surrounded by a landscape typical of the Soviet countryside. In 1972, employees of the Ocean Seafood Store in Moscow were recorded during working hours. The store was part of a chain specialized in seafood products, offering fresh, canned, and frozen fish to the Soviet public. This photo was taken in London, England, in the year 1908. It shows the high jump competition during the 1908 Olympic Games. The Games took place between April 27 and October 31. This description speaks about American football players in schools in Chicago, United States, in the year 1902. At that time, American football was played in schools with regular training. The sport involved teamwork, strength, and strategy. Diana Dors, a British actress, in the year 1958. She was known for her roles in films and for her striking presence on screen. At that time, Diana Dors was an important figure in the cinema of the United Kingdom. In November 1939, employees were recorded arranging packaged goods on display shelves in a grocery store in the city of San Angelo, Texas. In the 1930s, the Venice Beach Pet Show was a popular event held in Venice Beach, California. The show brought together residents and visitors who displayed their pets, including dogs, cats, and even exotic animals, in friendly competitions and presentations. In 1987, Sylvester Stallone and Brigitte Nielsen were prominent as a famous Hollywood couple. Both starred together in films such as Rocky Repair and Cobra, and their relationship was widely followed by the media during the 1980s. In 1936, a flight attendant was photographed serving cocktails to the crew during a luxury service flight between Croydon, England, and Paris, France, operated by the airline Air Dispatch. In 1975, Mr. T, whose real name is Lawrence Turreau, served in the United States Army. During his time in the armed forces, he served in the military police and was recognized for his discipline and performance, receiving praise for completing demanding physical training. In 1984, a visually impaired couple walked with their child through the streets of Budapest, Hungary. Guided by canes, they moved side by side while the child accompanied them with confidence and care.